Child of my heart, I need to talk to you about something that's been breaking mind the way you've been settling. I see it in your eyes when you accept the relationship that gives you crumbs when you deserve feasts. In the slump of your shoulders when you clock into the job that's slowly suffocating the gifts I placed in you. In the way you've learned to make peace with good enough when I created you for extraordinary. There's a faint tug you've been feeling, isn't there? Like a thread pulling you back from a dim-lit alley you almost walked down. Turning your face toward a sunlit meadow where wildflowers nod in welcome. Where the air tastes different because it's not recycled compromise, but fresh possibility. Or maybe it's like finally kicking off shoes that pinched with every step. Feeling dookiest grass under bare feet and realizing you've been walking in pain so long you forgot what freedom felt like. My beloved one, I didn't design you for the cramped spaces you've been tolerating. I didn't breathe life into you so you could spend it shrinking to fit into boxes other people built. Accepting leftovers when I set a table of abundance. Choosing safety over calling because fear whispered that you should be. Grateful for scraps. There's something insidious about settling. It doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It creeps in wearing the mask of wisdom, of maturity, of being realistic. It tells you that your dreams were youthful naivety, that your standards are too high, that you should lower your expectations because this is just how life works. And my child, before you realize what's happening, you've accepted the familiar ache of good enough like fog settling on a mirror, slowly obscuring the reflection of who you actually are until you can barely recognize yourself anymore. Complacency wraps around you like a worn blanket, and yes, it's comfortable. But it's also suffocating the fire I ignited in you before you took your first breath. You were never meant to be comfortable at the cost of your calling. You were never meant to be content with less than what I purposed for you. Welcome to Holy Spark Soul. If you're here, you know what it feels like to wonder if maybe you've been accepting too little, giving too much, shrinking when you should be expanding. You've felt that tug towards something more, but talked yourself out of it because reaching feels riskier than remaining. This channel exists because shallow encouragement doesn't dismantle the deep-rooted lies that keep us settling. Today, we're exploring why you should never, ever settle for less, and how to recognize the divine more I've been offering while you've been clutching the lesser. If this is your first time here, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because we're building a community that refuses to make peace with mediocrity, when magnificence is the birthright. Let's start with understanding how we got here. When did you start believing that wanting more was greedy? When did ambition become a dirty word? And when did settling start looking like humility? My beloved one, there's a difference between contentment and settling. Contentment is peace in the present while moving toward purpose. Settling is resignation that this is all there is, all there will ever be, and you should stop hoping for different. Contentment trusts my timing. Settling stops trusting altogether. And somewhere along the way, maybe through disappointments that piled up like stones or rejections that left bruises you're still nursing, you stopped reaching. You pulled your dreams in close, made them smaller. Told yourself that settling was actually maturity when it was just self-protection masquerading as wisdom. Think about Ruth. She's a widow in a foreign land, gleaning in fields just to survive, picking up scraps the harvesters left behind. She could have settled for perpetual survival, could have accepted that this was her lot, could have been grateful for any grain she could gather. But instead, when Naomi tells her about the kinsman redeemer, when there's a possibility of more than just survival, but actual redemption, actual covenant, actual fullness, Ruth doesn't shrink back. She doesn't say, "I'm just a Moabite widow. I should be grateful for what I have." She goes to the threshing floor. She makes herself known to Boaz. She positions herself for the more she's sensing is possible. And Boaz, when he sees her, calls her a woman of excellence. Marries her, redeems her, brings her into a story that becomes part of the lineage of kings. part of the very line that leads to my son, child of God. Ruth refused to settle for gleaning when redemption was available. She didn't let her past define her ceiling. She didn't accept less because she'd been through loss. And I honored that. I elevated that. I wrote her into a story that echoes through eternity because she recognized that settling for scraps when a seat at the table was being offered would have been an insult to the one preparing the feast. That's what settling does, it rejects the more I'm offering because it feels safer to stay in the familiar less. But safety isn't always holy. Sometimes it's just fear in disguise. Consider David facing Goliath. Saul tries to dress him in armor, tries to make him fit the mold of what a warrior should look like. But the armor doesn't fit. It's not David's. And David could have settled for it. Could have thought, well, the king knows best. Maybe I should just try to make this work, even though it feels wrong. But instead, he takes it off. He says no to the lesser option, the one that looks impressive but would have gotten him killed. And he goes with what he knows, sling, and stones and the name of the Lord. And that less in worldly eyes becomes more in mine because it's authentic. It's aligned with who David actually is, and it's powered by faith instead of conformity. My beloved one, how many times have you tried to squeeze into armor that doesn't fit? How many times have you accepted roles, relationships, positions that looked impressive to others but felt wrong to you? How many times have you settled for someone else's vision of your life instead of insisting on the one I gave you? David's refusal to settle for Saul's armor wasn't arrogance. It was integrity. It was knowing who he was and refusing to pretend to be someone else just because it seemed like the safe choice. And that refusal, that insistence on authenticity over acceptance, is what positioned him to slay giants. Then there's Esther. She's in the palace, queen over an empire, but her people are facing genocide. She could settle for her own safety. She could stay quiet, keep her head down, figure she got hers, and that's all that matters. But instead, she risks everything. She fasts, she prays, she goes before the king unbidden, which could mean death, and she says, "If I perish, I perish." She refuses to settle for personal comfort when a greater calling is beckoning. And that refusal, that willingness to reach for more, even at the risk of losing what she has, saves a nation. Child of my heart, what are you playing small to protect? What calling are you ignoring because answering it might cost you comfort? What more am I whispering about that you're pretending not to hear because settling feels safer than stepping? Esther's courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about refusing to let fear make her decisions. It was about recognizing that some things are worth risking everything for, and settling for less when more is needed, when more is possible. When more is purposed, that's not wisdom. That's waste. Let's go to the promises that anchor this truth. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope." Plans, not vague possibilities. Plans, detailed, specific, designed with you in mind. And those plans are for welfare, for shalom, for wholeness and flourishing and abundance. Not for harm, not for mediocrity, not for you to just survive or get by or make do. My beloved one, if you're settling for less than flourishing, you're settling for less than my plan. You're accepting harm disguised as humility. You're choosing a smaller story than the one I'm writing. Ephesians 3:20 promises something that should wreck every tendency to settle. Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think, according to the power at work within us. Far more, abundantly, than all we ask or even imagine. The ceiling you've accepted isn't my ceiling. The limits you've internalized aren't my limits. And when you settle for less, when you stop asking for more because you don't want to seem greedy or entitled, you're not being humble. You're doubting my ability and my willingness to exceed your imagination. The power at work within you, my spirit, my presence, it's designed for immeasurably more. But you have to stop settling for measurably less. Psalm 37:4 says, "Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." Desires, plural, of your heart. Not just one or two safe wishes, but the full range of what makes you come alive. What stirs passion? What feels too good to be true? And the promise isn't that I'll give you the desires if they're small enough or reasonable enough or spiritual enough. It's that when you delight in me, when you find your joy in my presence. The desires I've placed in your heart, the ones you've been suppressing because they felt too big or too selfish or too impossible, I give them, not as manipulation, as natural overflow of intimacy. When you delight in me, your desires align with my purposes, and what you want becomes what I want to give. So why do you settle? What's the fear underneath the resignation? Is it that you've been disappointed before and you don't think you can survive another letdown? Is it that you don't believe you're worthy of more, so you accept less and call it gratitude? Is it that the people around you have settled and choosing differently feels like judgment on their choices? My child, hear me clearly. Disappointment is real, but it's not final. Your past doesn't dictate your ceiling. And you're not responsible for other people's comfort with their own compromises. You're responsible for partnering with the purposes I have for you. And those purposes don't involve you playing small, so others feel better about their own shrinkage. Here's what settling costs. It costs you joy. You can't be truly joyful when you're living below your design. You might be content, you might be comfortable, but joy requires alignment, and settling is misalignment by definition. It costs you impact. The gifts I gave you, the calling I placed on you, they're meant to bless others, not just you. When you settle, when you bury your talents instead of investing them, you're not just hurting yourself. You're depriving the people who needed what only you carry. It costs you intimacy with me. Settling creates distance because you know in your spirit that you're saying no to what I'm saying yes to. And that tension erodes closeness, and it costs you legacy. The story I'm inviting you into is bigger than your lifetime, but you can't leave a legacy of more if you live a life of less now. Let's talk about what refusing to settle actually looks like practically. It starts with auditing your choices at crossroads with gratitude's lens. Not every option is wrong, but some options are less than what I'm offering. And you have to get skilled at spotting the difference. When you're making decisions, ask, is this choice expanding me or shrinking me? Is it moving me toward my purposes or away from them? Is the peace I feel actually peace, or is it just the absence of discomfort? Gratitude helps because when you're genuinely grateful for what you have, you can assess what you're being offered without desperation clouding your judgment. You can say no to good because you're holding out for great. You can walk away from almost right because you trust that it's fully right is coming. Then you cultivate cravings for the divine more. This is about retraining your appetite. You've been feeding on less for so long that your palate has adjusted. You think fast food is fine because you've forgotten what a real meal tastes like. So you spend time with me in solitary walks where you can hear my voice reminding you who you are and what you're made for. You share suppers with people who call you higher instead of keeping you comfortable. You read my word and let it reset your standards. Let it show you what abundance actually looks like. Let it ignite desires you've been suppressing. And slowly, you start craving more again. Not greed. Holy ambition. Divine discontent with anything less than my best. And my beloved one, you step into risks that feel like leaps but land as legacies. Refusing to settle isn't passive. It's active. It's saying yes to the opportunity that terrifies you because it's bigger than you've operated in before. It's ending the relationship that's comfortable but not covenant. It's leaving the job that pays well but kills your soul. It's starting the business, writing the book, having the conversation making the move that logic says is foolish, but your spirit says is essential. These aren't reckless choices. They're faith choices. And faith always looks like foolishness to people who've made peace with less. But you're not called to live for their approval. You're called to live for my glory. And my glory shows up when you refuse to settle for anything less than what I've designed. Let me tell you what happens when you stop settling. You start breathing differently. That constriction in your chest, the one you've carried so long you thought it was normal, it releases. Because you're finally living in alignment instead of opposition. You start seeing differently. Opportunities you've been blind to become visible because you're no longer resigned to limited options. You start attracting differently. The people, resources, connections I've been trying to send your way but couldn't because you are clutching the lesser. They start showing up. You start feeling differently. That numbness, that flatline existence you've been tolerating, it gives way to actual emotion, actual passion, actual aliveness. Because you were created for more, and when you finally choose it, everything in you that's been dormant wakes up. But child of God, I need you to hear this. Refusing to settle doesn't mean life gets easy. It means life gets real. It means you'll face opposition from people who preferred you small. It means you'll encounter challenges that test whether you really believe you deserve more. It means you'll have moments of doubt where the old, comfortable less looks appealing again. But here's the thing, hard doesn't mean wrong. Difficult doesn't mean you made a mistake. The resistance you face when you stop settling is often proof that you're finally on the right path. Because the enemy doesn't fight people who are playing it safe. He fights people who are threatening his territory by stepping into their purpose. There's a reason. I keep calling you my beloved one, my child, child of my heart. Because I need you to hear this isn't about earning more or deserving more. It's about receiving more. You already have my love. You already have my favor. You already have access to abundance. The only thing preventing you from experiencing it is your willingness to stop settling for less. And that willingness, that courage to say no to good enough and yes to great. It honors me because it says you believe my promises. It says you trust that what I have for you is better than what you've been accepting. It says you're willing to partner with my purposes instead of protecting your comfort. Here's what I want you to do, starting right now. I want you to identify one area where you've been settling. Just one. Maybe it's the relationship where you give 90% and receive 10%, and you've convinced yourself that's love. Maybe it's the job where you're underutilized and overlooked, and you've told yourself you should be grateful to have employment. Maybe it's the dream you've buried because it felt too big, or too late, or too impossible. Identify it, name it, and then ask me, what would refusing to settle look like here? What's the more you're offering that I've been too afraid to reach for? And then, my beloved one, I want you to take one step toward that more, not 10 steps, not a flying leap. Step. Make the phone call. Have the conversation. Submit the application. Set the boundary. Whatever the one next step is toward refusing to settle, take it. And watch what I do with your obedience, because here's the truth you need to anchor in. I don't reward settling. I reward faith. And faith looks like refusing to accept less when more is promised. Faith looks like David dropping Saul's armor. Faith looks like Ruth going to the threshing floor. Faith looks like Esther saying, "If I perish, I perish." Faith looks like you finally believing that you were made for more and acting like it's true. And when you do, when you move in that faith, I move in that moment. Doors open, provision appears, favor shows up. Not because you manipulated it, because you aligned with it. Because you stopped blocking the blessing with the barrier of settling. Let me paint you a picture of what's possible when you refuse to settle. Imagine waking up excited instead of resigned. Imagine working in your sweet spot, the place where your gifts and my purposes intersect, where what you do matters and you know it. Imagine relationships where you're fully known and fully loved, where you don't have to shrink or perform or pretend. Imagine finances where you're not just surviving, but thriving, where you can be generous because abundance is your reality, not your wish. Imagine purpose so clear that decisions get easier because you know what aligns and what doesn't. Imagine legacy where your life becomes a testimony that inspires others to refuse their own settling. That's not fantasy, my child. That's available. Not because you're special, but because I'm generous. And I'm just waiting for you to stop settling for the crumbs and come to the table reflecting on passages like this. Through a psychological lens can illuminate how ancient expressions of aspiration and abundance mirror our own inner dialogues, fostering resilience through honest expression. Yet if these themes stir deeper unrest, a conversation with a wise counselor might offer tailored clarity. But here's my final word to you before you go. Settling is a choice, and so is refusing to settle. Every day, every moment, you're choosing. You're choosing the comfortable less or the challenging more. You're choosing the familiar ache or the unfamiliar expansion. You're choosing to believe your past defines your future, or to believe my promises redefine everything. And my beloved one, I'm inviting you right now to choose differently. To choose the sunlit meadow over the dim-lit alley. To choose bare feet on dew-kissed grass over shoes that pinch. To choose the life I designed for you over the life you've resigned yourself to. Will it require courage? Yes. Will it cost you comfort? Probably. Will it be worth it? Absolutely. Because you weren't created to settle. You were created to soar. And I'm standing here with wings spread, waiting to catch you when you finally decide to jump. If this word stirred something in you, if you're recognizing areas where you've been settling and you're ready to reach for more, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your favorite scripture about God's abundance, about refusing to settle, about stepping into more. Share the one area where you're choosing today to stop accepting less. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Holy Spark Soul and turn on notifications. We're here every week exploring what it means to live in the fullness I designed instead of the fraction you've accepted. I'd also encourage you to watch our deep dive into the Psalms next, where we explore how worship realigns us with divine abundance. My beloved one, go from this place knowing that settling is beneath you. Not because you're better than anyone else, but because I made you for more, and settling dishonors the design. The familiar ache of good enough, it's time to let it go. The comfortable blanket of complacency, it's time to throw it off. The cramped boxes you've been tolerating, it's time to step out. I have plans for you that are welfare, not harm, future, not stagnation, hope, not resignation. I can do immeasurably more than you've been asking or imagining. And the desires of your heart, the ones you've been afraid to voice, I'm ready to give them. But you have to stop settling. You have to reach. You have to believe that what I have for you is better than what you've been accepting. And when you do, when you finally choose the more I've been offering, everything changes. The fog lifts. The meadow calls. And you realize you were never meant to walk in dim-lit alleys when sunlit fields were waiting. Choose more, child of my heart. Choose the life I purposed. Choose to never settle for less. I'll see you in the abundance.